we put you on the map. This is Ron Costa broadcasting live in the Mappable USA studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. And folks, today we're going to talk about blockchain. We're going to talk about NFTs, DAOs, all these other things that are confusing everyone. We're going to give it some light and hopefully demystify a lot of this, both good and bad. So before we start, let's introduce Vicky Hutchmala from the World Token Market. Vicky, how you doing over there today?
I'm fantastic, Ron, and another fabulous day in Vegas. But, I'm just thinking, all these podcasts that we do, and every time I say it's another fantastic day in Vegas, I guess, I don't know, maybe Vegas never has bad days. What do you think?
Oh, listen, it certainly beats any New York wet winter, and I know that from firsthand experience. But anyway, let's get on with the show here.
True.
Yeah, and let's introduce Samson Williams. Samson, again, is the president of the Crowdfunding Association. He's been on the show before. Samson, welcome back. How are you doing today?
I'm here in sunny South Florida, so we're doing excellent.
Excellent, excellent. We know where to be these days, I'll tell you. That is great. So, and apparently Florida is even warmer than Vegas is right now, from what I understand, right?
I hope so. It's probably 75 degrees. I'm going to go do a little snakehead fishing after this podcast. For all our fishing friends out there, snakehead are great to catch. A lot of fun.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're really happy that you got on the podcast again. I know you're so into crowdfunding. You're such an industry force out there. It's amazing you even have the time to do this. So I'm thankful for that. But before we get into what we want to talk about today, maybe we can get a little bit of your background once again and just give somebody a really quick review of your background and how you got to be where you are right now.
Yeah. I learned my finance background at a small startup called Fannie Mae. I used to be their crisis manager 2008 to 2016. So I apologize in advance if I make any mortgage-backed security references. But since then, I've lived and worked in Washington, D.C., Dubai, and Ireland. And in 2020, I became president of the Crowdfunding Professional Association, where we advocate for crowdfunding, whether it's donation, rewards, debt, or equity crowdfunding. And so we have a lot of people who are interested in blockchain-based digital assets, whether they're called NFTs, Non-fungible Tokens, or whether they're called DAOs, Distributed Autonomous Organizations. We're seeing a lot of interest in these buzzwords, and so I spend a lot of time demystifying what these buzzwords are. And when I'm not doing that, I actually teach at Columbia University in New York, as well as the University of New Hampshire School of Law, where we provide technical insights into lawyers and future lawyers about what these digital assets are, regardless of the hype that's around them.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Well, Samson, let's start off by with NFTs and explain to our listeners why NFTs are popular, gaining popularity, and why people should have one or invest in them.
Oh, I can't give you any investment advice because 5 or 6 people from the SEC would magically show up at my door before the phone call was over. But what I can tell you about non-fungible tokens is give you an example. You and I, we go to, what's this store called? CVS. And so we go to CVS and we pick up a bag of gummy bears and we walk up to the checkout. And at CVS, you check out, you pay for it, and they print you out this long receipt. And so as they're printing out this 3-foot long receipt, Vicky, you just paid for this bag of gummy bears. I give you the receipt, and I start to eat all the gummy bears. And I tell you, Vicky, that receipt is your NFT. And you say, but I just bought gummy bears. I'm like, no, you didn't. You bought the receipt. And so this is where that cognitive dissonance kicks in for a lot of people because they're like, hold up, Samson. You just told me that Vicky paid money for a receipt that says she bought a receipt. I'm like, yep, that's what non-fungible token, that's what NFTs are. In the digital world, where you have an image of a bag of gummy bears on a URL, the NFT isn't actually the image itself. It is the address to the URL, to your website address, where that image lives. And so in the digital space, there was a lot of hype around, oh, my goodness, NFTs. I bought this NFT for this monkey, this piece of Microsoft Paint art, when what you've actually paid for is a receipt that points to the URL where that image is housed. You don't actually own that you don't actually own that image. This is super important because, Vicki, while I'm eating the gummy bears, and by the way, gummy bear world, the green gummy bears are actually strawberry flavored because the red ones are cherry. And I know that's going to drive you nuts for the rest of your life, but that's very true. And I know this because I only eat the green and the red gummy bears, and I throw the rest away. And as Vicki sees me throwing away the gummy bears that aren't green and red, she's like, what did I pay for? I'm like, you paid for the non-fungible token that says that you paid for that receipt. And this is where the hype is with NFTs right now.
A very, very creative way of explaining that, Samson, that's pretty much understandable for anybody who's never even heard of NFTs and what you're actually, because that's where the confusion is, right? Is, okay, I have this image and I'm selling this image and you're buying a portion of it, but you really don't have it. And then putting it into that perspective of you didn't buy anything, but the receipt that says you bought something, that's like, okay, that explains it. That explains it. And that's why it can be anything besides gummy bears. It could be anything you want because you're not really ever selling it. You're just selling the opportunity to purchase the receipt that says, oh, look, I have something. Don't know what it is, but I have it.
Correct. And so there is value in having, not only because the receipt is proof of purchase, and it could also be proof of authenticity. So there's 100% a place for NFTs when they're attached to a tangible object, to real property, like a mortgage, a deed, a title, or some bit of real estate. But the problem is, the hype is, people have been selling NFTs, the receipts to images, digital images that they say are scarce. And the really hilarity about the scarcity of the digital images is I can take a screenshot, I can retweet the image, which is like, how scarce is it if you're telling me to retweet that image and that image goes viral? Now 10,000 people have this image, but, you know, Vicki's like, well, I can prove to you I'm the person who first had the image, but I'm like, I'm going to go print this out and hang it up on my wall. You tell me how scarce it is.
Exactly.
But when you talk about real estate, having social proof, public social proof that you own a piece of property, that's actually valuable. What's valuable is that you can prove publicly you own a piece of property. That is the NFT. The title might be the NFT, but the only reason that title that's been NFT'd is valuable is because there's that underlying piece of property that it represents. So for digital art,
part.
Correct. For digital art, there's no such thing as scarcity of digital art, and there's no such thing as there's no value in NFTs for there's no value for NFTs for digital art. For real property, because, you know, once Vicki buys this property and she can show everyone, hey, I own this property outright. Here's the title. Here's the deed. It's immutable. Anyone can see this, but they can't change it unless Vicki sells that to them or transfers that to them. That is a very powerful tool. If you're in the title company business, you might be concerned because that's going to be the death knell in your business as a whole, because typically you buy a house, you know, $300,000, you pay $3,000 for a title search that tells you who last owns it. If you can automate that process so that you have an NFT that shows you the history of who purchased it, who owns it currently, then and what liens or obligations are against that title, that's a very powerful feature, and that does actually have value. So I want to be clear that most NFTs now are just fraudulent, but there will be a place for approximately the 1% of NFTs that represent real, actual, tangible property.
And not just really real estate, just anything that is tangible.
What about in the sports world, Samson? People are doing NFTs of jerseys and footballs and name, image, likeness, and all that other stuff. Is that considered? What do you think about something like that?
So again, for like football jerseys and sports memorabilia, that's just like if you have a starter cap. In the 90s, everyone was a rage about having a starter cap. It's that proof of authenticity that this is a real starter cap. Does the NFT itself, is that valuable? Or are you actually paying for the hat, paying for that good? And same thing with the jersey. It's nice to know it's not the jersey itself, you know, it's a LeBron James jersey. It's a Steph Curry jersey. Is it a limited edition? The NFT, that's that proof of authenticity that says this is one of 200, or number 19 of 200. The NFT just represents the number, the sequence of which that product was produced. It does not represent the product itself. And so, again, when you're going to consider certificates of authenticity or proof of purchase for sporting memorabilia, it's not the NFT that has value. It's the object it's attached to that has value. The NFT, it does serve the function of letting people know this is a bona fide, a.k.a. real McCoy, of this product, and it's number, 19 of 200.
And so the exclusivity of the tangible thing that the NFT represents, if you are selling one of 200, once you've sold 200, then now how does the value escalate or maintain its value? How does it change for the person who bought the NFT in the first place? Where do they realize a gain?
That's a great question, Vicki. This is a moment where you need to find someone who believes that number 199 of some good product or service is worth more than you paid for it. And so now we're talking about collector mentality. I'm a huge fan of Antique Roadshow, by the way.
I love it.
And so is that jersey worth $5,000? Well, you need to find a fan who says so. We'll pay you that. That's how you demonstrate that value. But again, the fan isn't paying for the NFT. They're paying for the jersey, and then the NFT does provide provenance, does provide context and history, and that helps validate that the jersey is the real McCoy, the bona fide jersey. That helps it. But again, don't confuse the certificate of authenticity with the object it's attached to.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. Again, going back to Antique Roadshow, if you show up with a sword that you say is from the Civil War, but if you say it's from the Civil War and then you show up with a letter from the Army commander or cavalry officer who you say it was attached to in a photograph, those photographs, that letter, it gives context to that sword to let the potential buyers know, oh, this is a bona fide sword. This sword was really at the Battle of Gettysburg and belonged to this person. The NFT does the same thing. It provides that additional context to let people know this is a bona fide jersey.
Well, and plus, if you bought an NFT or of something authenticated with the real provenance, then you can also, I don't want to have this anymore, and then you can trade that to someone else, or someone else can purchase it from you, or you can just go and buy something else, some other NFT that represents some other thing, right?
100%. You can completely trade it, exchange it. The nuance there is, if you trade an NFT, you need to note the trade on blockchain or on an exchange so that people know ownership went from Samson to Vicky. Otherwise, if I paid you cash for it, no one's able to trace it that you sold it to me. They just know that I now have it. But when they look on the blockchain, it says the last owner was Vicky. And the first question that pops into my mind is, did I steal it from her?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
And this is, again, where NFTs serve a function and able to preserve who owned what at what time to create that record. And so again, when we're talking about deeds, titles, real estate, NFTs are going to have a profound effect on that industry.
Right. You're right.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right.
Are NFTs then considered almost like a crowdfunding vehicle then? I mean, can issuers actually raise money through their NFTs? Is that something that they're doing these days?
They're calling them NFTs. And so the New York Stock Exchange recently said that they wanted to be a marketplace for NFTs. And what that really means is that as most people are marketing NFTs, they are securities because they're not attached to any underlying asset. And so because they're marketing them as securities, you just need to follow either Reg A, Reg D, Reg CF rules from the 1933 Securities and Exchange Act. And so many people mistakenly say, I'm going to fractionalize ownership of this jersey so that everyone can, so that 10,000 people can own this LeBron James jersey. So when you fractionalize ownership of that jersey, you are creating an investment scheme. And when you go on the internet and you ask strangers for money in exchange for this fractionalized bit of jersey, you are crowdfunding. The question is, have you filed the appropriate exemption with the Securities and Exchange Commission? 99% of the time, the answer to that is no. And if you're an investor, you assume all the risk of participating in an unregulated security scheme, because if you lose all your money, you have no recourse. Or rather, you can't go complain to the SEC, and they'll be like, well, we told you not to do that.
Well,
right. Yeah, exactly. And I have a friend of mine that has opened an account or whatever on OpenSea, I believe. That's the marketplace, one of the marketplaces that you referenced before. And he was telling me that he's actually making money trading these NFTs. I don't know how he does it or what making money really means to him, but it seems to me that, like you said, these NFTs, I could probably make one on OpenSea later on and have no SEC approval at all, right?
And so the SEC, I'm not going to talk disparaging about them because I occasionally see them in the hallway here in D.C.
We don't want you to get into trouble.
They will. Their cycle is a new exotic financial product comes out. They spend 2 years studying it. Then they determine what they're going to do in year 3. Then they start on enforcement actions in year 4. However, in the meantime, particularly retail investors, they all get burnt because for 4 years or so, it's the wild, wild west. We saw this in 2016 and 17, where the SEC didn't respond to ICOs, initial coin offerings. You might remember those. And so $26.2 billion generated through crowdfunding, through unregulated crowdfunding in the ICO market through 2016 to 2019. And so only recently did the SEC actually start with the enforcement actions, because again, it takes them about 4 years before they get the enforcement engine going. But they're slow on the uptake, but once they're in process, they're very thorough. And so today with NFTs, you'll see that pretty safe to say that OpenSea will have to register as an exchange or shut down. They can either register as an exchange or shut down. The New York Stock Exchange might buy them and then then register them as an exchange and pay some, hundreds of millions of dollars, or rather probably $50 to $100 million fine to the SEC for operating as an unregistered exchange.
Isn't that crazy?
And so what does that do to the NFTs
that
they've been trading and exchanging?
The value of the NFT gets sucked out overnight. It goes to zero. Because who wants to trade an NFT that you can't trade it anymore? So.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, again, let's take an example of the uniform again, the LeBron James jersey. I go out and I want to NFT that. I go to OpenSea. I create an account there, right? I could probably do that immediately. And are there fees involved in list? How does OpenSea make money? Are they making a commission on the trade?
Oh yeah, 100%. They're just like any exchange or any marketplace. They make a commission. They charge a fee for the buyers and the sellers. That's why OpenSea, they love the hype, because then they just sell more. So it's great.
Well, when a client comes to you and says, Samson, I want to make an NFT. How much is it going to cost me? What do you say to them? It's free until you pay the commission?
No, the cost varies, because in NFT world, most of them are made on what's called an ERC20 protocol, which is Ethereum, and so you have to pay something called gas. And so it may be free to make the NFT, because you've probably seen this artwork, which is garbage. It looks like a third grader used Microsoft Paint to draw a self-portrait.
Went crazy with the marker.
Yeah. So the art, it's not even. We very loosely call it artwork, and so the expense comes into what's called mint the NFT, and minting is the process by which you put that data on the blockchain. That's where you pay gas fees. Gas fees vary from day to day. It might only cost you $10. It might cost you $300 just to mint the NFT. That doesn't include the sales and the marketing, because just because you mint an NFT, it doesn't mean that there's going to be hundreds or thousands or millions of eyeballs who see this new work of art that you put up and who want it. And that's part of why many NFTs have deceptive practices, because more often than not, it's called a wash trade. So Vicky creates the NFT. She posts it on OpenSea. She buys it from herself for $10,000. Then she buys it from herself again for $100,000. Then she buys it from herself again for $1 million. Then she posts that same NFT back on OpenSea, but says now the last time it sold for $10 million, but now it's worth $50. And her question is, can she convince someone to buy this NFT that she's been wash trading amongst herself for $50 million? What's the actual value of the NFT? Well, it looks like a third grade picture made in paint. There's no intrinsic value. But if she can have a successful exit where she sells it to someone, well, it's very valuable to her.
For sure. That's a crazy strategy. I'm sure it happens every day. My God, that really is ridiculous. So you create this NFT. When you say that you mint the NFT, that's not a physical thing, right? We're not talking about a physical token as a proof of ownership. You're getting something in your blockchain wallet. How do you prove that you're going to get
You're going to get a 42-character key. You're going to get a string of 42 characters that proves that this is on the blockchain. Got to remember, these are all digital assets. And so in the digital world, you don't get a physical anything. I should note that if you're going to do what's called wash trading, and that's where you're selling the same asset to yourself until you can exit at a higher price, you're engaged in fraud. Let's be upfront. You're engaged in fraud. But while Vicky is busy selling herself her own product, when you take it from $10,000 up to $1 million, you need to pay SALT. And that stands for state and local taxes, as well as federal taxes. Because if it's not a securities, then it's just a good product or service. What's the state tax there for Vegas, Nevada?
No state tax.
No state tax. That's awesome. In Texas, the state tax is 8%. In Florida, it's 6%. And so this is why a 99-cent candy bar costs, at least when I was in Chicago, it cost like $1.19. I was like, I don't understand what just happened, because there's not only the state of Illinois, there's also Cook County, where Chicago is located. They have a tax too. And so if you're selling this NFT to yourself, the IRS, once they're cut, they're going to say, hey, we see that you had some appreciation in the value of this thing you were running a scam on. You owe us that. You owe us our cut. So just keep in mind, if you're out there going to commit some fraud, it's not the SEC you should worry about. It's the IRS, because the IRS always gets their money.
Eventually, you're right.
Yeah, they do. They do. And then one last question regarding these NFTs then, Samson, is your wallet, I guess you could create, something like a MetaMask or something. Do you have to have a separate wallet for every single, I guess, exchange that you're working with, OpenSea or Rarity, or do they all work with the same wallet?
Nope. You can have one wallet. If you go to myethereumwallet.com, it's a great place to set up a wallet if you're a novice. And so you just need one wallet. You can have as many wallets as you want, but just keep in mind you have to remember your private keys. There's a common expression, not your keys, not your crypto. And so what that means is if you forget what your keys are to that wallet, there is no customer service to let you know what that is. This is where
you can't reset.
Many people, you can't reset it. There's no customer service. There's no Bitcoin help desk. There's no Ethereum help desk. And so whatever value is locked in that wallet, it's pretty much gone because you can't get it out.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll have to remember that, because I can't even tell you how many times I've lost my physical keys. It's not a good thing.
This is why so many people use exchanges, because exchanges, they hold your keys, but they charge you fees for that. You just have to use their platform. So they will hold your keys, but again, not your keys, not your crypto.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So we talked about NFTs. Let's move it over to the other one, the DAO. What are DAOs?
DAOs are distributed autonomous organizations. And at the end of the day, you're going to hear a lot of hype around DAOs, and you can look at it from two perspectives. One is a lot of people are learning for the first time why corporations exist in corporate law. And two is, if you're going to bring together people who want to be governed by an algorithm, what you're really forming is either a digital state of communism or a union. You can pick what you want to call it. And so, again, the purpose of the DAOs, you might have heard of Constitution DAO.
Right.
Where
where they wanted to buy the original copy of the U.S. Constitution?
Yes. And so Constitution DAO, they raised over $40 million in 4 days through crowdfunding.
Jeez.
But once you peel back the onion and look at the details, they used donation crowdfunding to raise $41 million. And why it's donation crowdfunding is because the people who contributed to the DAO, they made a donation. And again, once you read the fine print, you'll be like, oh, I am donating to this organization. Like, yep, you're giving it a donation. And if you donate, let's say you donate $100. When you donate the $100, you have to pay gas because they collected contributions in Ethereum. And so when you make donations or transactions in Ethereum, you pay gas fees. So if you donated $100, gas fee is probably $20. And when they raised this $40 million, but they were outbid for the Constitution, some people got a refund. And so when they went to refund you your money, again, they had to pay gas fees. Then it cost you another $20 to refund your $100. So in total, of your $100, you actually spent $140 to donate. You spent $40 to donate $100. That might not make the most sense to many people.
Man, that's crazy. Yeah.
And so,
and especially if you don't know it till the end of the transaction.
You don't, correct. And remember, if you contributed more money, your gas fees might be significantly higher. And so, the other thing to keep in mind with a DAO, you can have an investment club, and investment clubs are very old types of securities and exchange. Very old types of securities and exchange organizations where you have 100 people who come together for a common cause of investing into something. You can do that. You don't need blockchain to do that. You can form an LLC and have members in your LLC. If you create a DAO in Wyoming is a big fan of DAOs. If you look at their FAQs on their Wyoming DAOs, it has to be formed as an LLC. And so the thought that there's no governance, that there's no humans making decisions, that's not the case. There are. However, if you turn over governance of your DAO completely to a human being, I wish I could remember the name of this. It wasn't Constitution, maybe it was Blockhouse. So there are these things that they're called smart contracts, which is a big, big misnomer. They're really terms and conditions because you can't negotiate them, and you should never call something a smart contract if you can't negotiate for it. But in these smart contracts, what it allowed one individual to do was to amass enough cryptos to swing the vote of the DAO. And what that did was it enabled that person to drain, I think it was $10 million from the DAO because he outvoted everyone. And so what that DAO was based on is called staking. And staking is based on how much money you have in the DAO, it correlates how many votes you have. And that in any other world is called plutocracy, which is rule governance by the wealthy, by the few and the wealthy. So that's another reason it's not a really good idea.
Well, and if DAOs are handled on the blockchain and blockchain is transparent in what you're doing and you're using smart contracts to trigger activity, then I would assume that kind of protects you from this kind of thing. But if the whole premise is that the collective within the DAO is buying tokens and those tokens represent votes, the more tokens you buy, the more majority of the vote you have. And like you said, if you have a majority, then you decide everything and forget everybody else who just put in their money for you to steal, because you can vote yourself to take all the money away from everybody else because you've got the majority of votes. That seems to me kind of a scammy thing.
Well, this is where you should always, do your own research, be very careful. That DAO, by the way, is called Build Finance DAO.
Right, Build Finance.
Yes, so that was the hack where it's called a governance attack. However, as we have nerd fights, I remind people, if your quote unquote smart contracts, if this is how they're designed, that's not a hack. That's not a bad actor. Someone read your bylaw.
Yeah, somebody took advantage of your I don't want to say stupidity, but your not being preparedness.
Yeah. It is, and if you remember Carl Icahn in the 80s and 90s, and really the 80s, what he did for being a advocate investor, it's that same mentality where, if you read the bylaws and you're following the bylaws of your DAO, your distributed autonomous organization, and your quote-unquote smart contracts automatically facilitate the execution of these smart contracts that enable someone to drain your treasury, well, that's not an attack. That's just someone who understands your bylaws better than you do. So, again, go on.
Well, no, I was just going to mention it's the same with the tax code. If you make a lot of money and you understand the tax code and you know what to do so that you pay less taxes, you haven't done anything wrong. You've just used the code to your advantage, where someone else may not understand the tax code as well and they just pay the full tax. Well, it's not your fault because you saved it. You just used the tax code in a better way, but you didn't do anything wrong.
100%. And just for your listeners, just remember, if you're engaged in a DAO where it's not formed as a limited liability company. That's what LLC stands for, or a corporation. If it's not formed as one of those entities, that means each individual is responsible for the actions of the other individual. So
exactly.
if you have a bad actor within your DAO, you become personally liable for whatever they do, because you don't have the benefits of being a limited liability company or of being a corporation. And this is where
you got to say it right. You definitely set it up that way.
Yes.
But after this explanation, Sam, so I'm trying to wrap my head around why a DAO would be any better than, if I have 100 investors, I pull them all together, I do a syndication, I do a private placement. Why is a DAO better than that? It doesn't make any sense right now off what you just said, to me at least. No, am I missing something here?
Oh, no, you're just a rational person. It's a misperception. And there's some people who want to have an organization that's governed by an algorithm. And I tell people, you never want your finances governed by an algorithm. It's like calling customer service and talking to a machine.
Do these people not see Terminator 2?
I don't know. They don't know who Skynet is. But more importantly, if you have a common objective, if humans get together for a common objective, like in real estate, just join a cooperative, a co-op. This is an old form. Cooperatives exist. They don't require any fancy technology. You get your 100 friends together as part of your co-op, and you go do whatever it is that you want to do. If you want to get together, bring a bunch of humans together to advocate for better working conditions, living wages, healthcare, that's called a union. You don't need blockchain to do that. And so you'll hear people say DAOs, where it's distributed autonomous organization. And I tell people, you don't want your autonomous organization going up against either A, my creativity, or B, the real scary part, my stupidity. Because your machine doesn't know how stupid I can get when interacting with it. And if you think you've built a smart contract, give it to a dumb person, and they'll prove how stupid your smart contract is.
Well, because there's always, no matter how great your idea is and no matter what your agenda is, there's always going to be somebody who's going to look at it, take it apart, and take advantage of it. For every good thing, there's always a bad character and a bad actor. So, and if you're not smart enough to do it to prevent that from happening in the first place, well, then you know what? You suffer the consequences because of it.
Yeah, and I would say that humans are more curious than malicious, because curious humans will also deconstruct your elegantly compiled code and introduce new code to it, and you don't know what's going to happen after that. So again, as always, if you're going to do investment into novel and emerging technology, first off, just look at what they're doing and say, oh, there's some other models out there, some other organizational models out there that we can do the same thing with. What's the difference? What's the advantage? Weigh them carefully. And if you're really unsure about something, wait a while, see how it plays out, because people are like, oh, let's jump on this bandwagon. I'm like, you might, that's not that dog, I'm from Texas, so we say that dog don't hunt.
Right.
And that's true.
No, you definitely have to worry about all these things that we talked about in the podcast today. But I'll tell you, I mean, we're already running late on this one, and Samson, we could talk about this for an hour or so. But in case people are listening and maybe want more information, how would they get a hold of you? What's the best way to contact you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Samson Williams, and I forgot to summarize that in 2021, regulation crowdfunding raised over $502 million across all 70 platforms. In the Reg A Plus world, they raised over $2 billion. So while we talked about technology, I don't want to depreciate the role that humans play when you aggregate collective will and collective funds. I'm a huge fan and proponent of regulated crowdfunding, just not of novel technology that's used to do unregulated activities. So if you want to listen to me rant about that, find me on LinkedIn at Samson Williams.
Now, you couldn't be more clear about that, and I agree as well. Vicky, what do you think about this podcast? Did we enlighten a lot of people on this? I mean, I know, add me to that list.
Oh, absolutely, Ron, because the more creative people become with technology that is just growing leaps and bounds, it's a perception that this is great, this is wonderful, and I'm going to make a lot of money or do this thing, but creativity sometimes is not a good thing. And as Samson explained here in our podcast, NFTs sound great, DAOs sound great, but unless you do the due diligence and know exactly what you're getting into, don't touch them with a 10-foot pole. And thank you, Samson. Thank you for explaining that to our listeners so that they have a better idea that not every shiny object is a good thing to have or play
100%.
with.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you again, Samson. It was a pleasure having you on again as usual. And Vicky, thanks for co-hosting this episode. Folks, you're listening to the Mappable USA podcast at mappableusa.com. Just go to that website, scroll down on the homepage. You'll see all our syndication sources. You just pick the one you like best, subscribe, and you'll never miss another one of our episodes. If you want to be a guest in the show, like Samson was today, there's a guest tab. Fill that out. We'll see what we can do about getting you on the show. And if you like what you heard today, send us an email at info@mappableusa.com, or just leave a comment on whatever page you're listening to this on right now. So thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. And we'll be at you next time with another Mappable USA podcast. Have a great week, everyone.